Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. Nigeria's economy grew by 4.23% in the second quarter, signaling a cautious optimism as the country navigates structural reforms. Can this growth be sustained in the coming quarters? The Central Bank of Nigeria has cut its benchmark interest rate to 27%, aiming to stimulate borrowing, investment, and overall economic activity. Will this rate cut strike the right balance between boosting growth and controlling inflation? Several Sahel states have announced their withdrawal from the International Criminal Court (ICC), branding it a neocolonial tool. Does this withdrawal strengthen their sovereignty or weaken the fight against impunity? Joining us today on the podcast for further insights is Sheyi Owojulebe, an analyst. Welcome, Sheyi, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's always a pleasure to have you, Shay. Let's start with the Nigeria economic growth. Beyond the GDP numbers, I mean, we're seeing a kind of growth in our economy in Q2. What do you think is contributing to this growth? What sectors are truly driving it? And are they resilient enough to withstand the current economic pressures that Nigeria is facing?
Well, what we have seen so far as regarding the GDP growth is, as the government of the day would like to term it, is as a result of the reforms that have been implemented over the past 2 years, so to speak, right? Because as we saw it, or as we all knew, the fuel subsidy or the petrol subsidy was a major chain in the neck, if I can use that, on the neck of the Nigerian government and the Nigerian people, and it was a significant strain on the economy. And so, removing that, or that decision to remove subsidy, freed up um, money, some monies for the government to um, to channel into other things. And as we saw, the non-oil sector in the past few quarters now has been steadily moving towards has been on a steady, slow but steady path of growth, and we also saw that in the GDP numbers, right? And another thing, so is that like a number of factors. It's also about the GDP rebasing. And so a lot more things are now being considered in Nigeria's GDP calculation. So all of these are what contributed to the numbers that we're seeing now. So, as I said, GDP rebasing, some of the economic reforms that were implemented, and also a steady increase in non-oil exports. Those are the things that contributed to the GDP growth numbers that we saw.
Thank you very much, Shay, for clarifying that. But now we're seeing this economic growth in Nigeria, right? But how can we translate this as growth into improving the standard of living for citizens who are facing inflation and unemployment?
Well, so that's like two questions in one, but the first or the most important part of this would be to improve productivity within the economy. And a major way there are several ways of improving productivity. There is investment in infrastructure, right? There's the first investment in infrastructure. There is also availability of capital. And I know that we're going to briefly talk on that topic when we get to the topic on, I hope, on CBN's rate cuts. So yes, improve the productivity within the economy is a way of helping people, of improving the standard of living of citizens, and also if infrastructure. So, for example, we all know how Nigeria has experienced with epileptic power supply, a situation where that kind of infrastructure, a key infrastructure that is fixed or is steadily being improved, would increase opportunities for people to conduct businesses within the economy, to employ other people, to pay taxes that the government can then use that the government can invest in social services, right? So that's on one hand. On the other hand, from the GDP numbers, we saw that the agricultural sector recorded a slight growth. And when you go to the market today, we'll find out that the prices of some food items, especially the locally produced ones, have now started declining. There's rice, there's beans, and even peppers. The prices of food items like that, basic food items, have started declining. However, the food items that we have not seen decline are the imported food items, which of course is due to the naira devaluation, and even some agricultural, that's animal protein. Now, the prices of those have not declined, unlike what we're seeing in the prices of crops. So it's when the agricultural sector grows better and there is adequate supply of food in the economy, people will definitely have a better living experience within the economy, so to speak. As we all know, in the Maslow's pyramid of needs, food is like something very basic that everyone must have access to. So when um, the agricultural sector, and also with the agricultural sector, insecurity has been a major challenge with banditry in the core food producing states. So things like that are what hamper or slow down the growth that we would naturally experience in the agricultural sector. So when food is made available at an affordable rate to the citizens and productivity within the economy is improved by improving or investing in infrastructure, Nigerians will generally have a better standard or quality of life.
I mean, I do agree with you that food is really important, right? And you mentioned the CBN story. I mean, that's our second story. So, the Central Bank of Nigeria has cut interest rates. I mean, I'm curious, and I'm sure all our listeners are curious as well. Why did the CBN decide to, cut the interest rate? What informed this? And kind of like, what do you think the effect would be on the economy in the long term and the short term as a result of these cuts as well?
Well, it's good to note, or it's worthy to note that Nigeria is the last of the big economies within the sub-Saharan Africa region to cut rates. And a lot of it, or should I say that there is a relationship or interest rates. Okay, so let me explain it like this. Interest rate is a tool used by monetary authorities to fight inflation. And so when inflation is high, monetary authorities would increase interest rates. What increased interest rate does is that it limits the amount of money available within the economy because loans become expensive for people to take. And so when people can no longer take loans, it reduces what money people have access to. And when there's not a lot of money in circulation or there isn't too much money chasing too few goods, prices will fall. And as we have seen within the Nigerian economy, and as I was saying the other time, prices have begun to fall in Nigeria. And so the CBN adopted a cautious approach by cutting interest rates, I think by just 0.5%, to show that we're not out of the woods yet. Nigeria still has an inflation problem that still needs to be tackled. But also the CBN has to respond to acknowledge that yes, inflation is dropping, and that's why the CBN dropped interest rates. Now, as to the effects or the impact of this rate cut, first is that loans will become slightly cheaper because the monetary policy rate is the baseline, that's like minimum interest rate level within the economy. So loans will become slightly cheaper, and then businesses and individuals and households can take loans to maybe expand operations or increase their consumption. That's the first thing that happens within the economy. Secondly, is that it will then, on the flip side, it then affects the interest that investors, whether locally or foreign portfolio investors, a cut in the rates will then affect the returns that they can make on their investment. But Nigeria still has enjoyed increased and a high. Nigeria has enjoyed an influx of foreign portfolio investment in the last few quarters because of the high interest rates. And so while other economies have also dropped, Nigeria's interest rate is still slightly higher than than the neighboring countries. And so we can still maintain or still attract significant foreign portfolio investment. Right. So that's some of the impacts of the rate cut. However, as I said, that the CBN was cautious in their rate cut decision. The CBN did not cut the rates too low, because if you bring the interest rates too low, then people will take loans indiscriminately, if I can put it like that. And then it could cause us to go back to the high inflation era, right? Because a lot of money, people will then have a lot of money bidding or pricing goods based on the monies they have access to. So there is that, and also that could even then affect the exchange rate, such that the recent gains that we've seen that the naira has recorded against the dollar would be reversed. So these are some of the positive and the negative impacts of interest rate cuts within an economy.
Thank you very much for breaking down interest rate cuts and why governments, decide, or institutions such as the CBN decide to take rate cuts. I know you mentioned a bit about exchange rate, but do you think that this decision will affect the already volatile exchange rate environment for Nigeria? And do you think it has the possibility? I know you talked about, the CBN still, keeping the rates not really low, which would make a lot of people, come and get more loans, and there'll be money circulating in the economy. But do you think that it would worsen inflation, right? Or it's a good step that they are taking? And also it'll be interesting. Do you think that, now they've cut it, do you think there's a possibility of them increasing it in the future, or even cutting it more lower?
Well, it depends on the CBN leadership. When he was elected, or when he was appointed as governor of the CBN, Mr. Olayemi Cardoso had said that the CBN would use conventional tools to fight inflation, and interest rates is one of the most common conventional tools used in fighting inflation. And so, in a situation where the recent gains were seen in inflation is reversed, then sorry, did my background make noise or can you still hear me?
No, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. So in the event where the recent gains or the recent easing that we're seeing in the inflation, in the event where it is reversed, then the CBN would go back to increasing the interest rate, right? Same thing, and the same goes for the exchange rate. If we have a situation where the naira reverses some of the gains that it has made against the dollar, the CBN might either choose to intervene in the markets by selling dollars or use the interest rates as a tool. However, in the short term, we do not see this particular rate cut, at least we do not see this particular rate cut having a significant impact on the exchange rate.
Okay, thank you for that. Under our final story, Sahel states are quitting the International Criminal Court. I mean, the International Criminal Court is vital because it helps in the prosecution of individuals for serious crimes like genocide, war crimes, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression. And, a lot of countries who face like wars try to ensure that they are members of the International Criminal Court. And here we are seeing Sahel countries quitting the ICC. What do you think pushed the Sahel? I mean, it's important to know like why they did push to quit the ICC. I know that they have been taking their new governments have been taking bold steps, cutting their ties from foreign countries. Um, do you think this is just one of their steps to, to strengthen their sovereignty as a as nation states, um, and build their cooperation as well? And what do you think will be like their immediate political or diplomatic implications for their exit from the ICC? I know it's quite a mouthful of questions, but
Okay, so let me try to break it down. Um, I think that this was to be expected, or this was expected, at least from my own calculations, this was expected because the trio, the AES states as they are called, Burkina Faso, Niger, and Mali, when the the military leadership came on board, they've been quite vocal about wanting to exercise their sovereignty, wanting to break away from their colonial, I don't want to say colonial leaders, but France, which colonized them, and there's even been talks about them launching a new currency or that they are working on a new currency and all of that, even misinformation on social media about their endeavors. But one thing these rulers or leaders have been vocal about, as you said, was that they want to break away from the West. And we have seen that they have even moved closer to Russia and they've been on state visits to Russia in the time that they have taken over the helm of power or the affairs of their respective states. So I think that this was to be expected. Remember that they've also left ECOWAS, which is even more local to the region. But their excuse was that ECOWAS was simply a tool of control for the West. And so leaving the ICC is not in any way surprising. That's the first thing. And now the second thing, talking about the impact, it's worthy to note, or it's important to know that this withdrawal does not take effect immediately, according to the statutes of that established the International Criminal Court. this would only be effective 1 year from the notice date. And also, what it means is that the ICC cannot prosecute future war crimes committed in these territories. But the ICC can prosecute the previous crimes that were committed when they were members of the ICC. We should also remember that the ICC is not like the everyday court, and so they have specific crimes they that they prosecute, right? Like war crimes, genocide, crimes against humanity, right? So all those large, if I can say, large scale crimes, right? Those are the areas that the ICC focuses on, and so it's it's not surprising that the AES states have withdrawn their membership or have put in a notice to withdraw their membership of the ICC. It's not surprising. It toes the line of their anti-West rhetoric. It toes the line of West rhetoric, and it possibly positions them to to get closer, or it puts them in an advantage position for their other anti-West counterparts outside the African continent.
Thank you very much, Shay. I mean, one final question I would like to ask is, I mean, as you spoke, you said so they can charge for crimes that have happened in the past, but for future crimes. Some critics will look at it and say, you know what? Aren't they just trying to prepare the road because, for immunity against crimes that they might commit as leaders, um, taking up in this new dispensation that they're having. So in order to, protect themselves from the prosecution from the International Criminal Court, they say, you know what, let's come out. In whose best interest, I mean, is this? Is it for the people of the Sahel who are being ruled or governed, or for their leaders? I mean, just your thoughts on that as well.
Well, with military leadership, or yeah, as, as we all know, there is always the risk of crimes against humanity. We were quite familiar with the Nigerian experience under military rule, and so things like freedom of speech, freedom of movement, are not exactly guaranteed, right? So when you ask in whose favor it is, I think that we all know the people who make the decisions. And with military leadership, they make decisions as they seem fit. So I don't think it's that I should go all out to say in whose favor it is, but we cannot say. But yes, there is a risk of us hearing about issues of suppression of human rights, of restriction of press freedom. All these are to be expected when you have military leadership. And so it would not be surprising if we have that kind of situation in Burkina Faso, Niger, or Mali. Already in Burkina Faso, you have journalists who have fled the country because they've been accused of reporting negative things about their current leaders. At the end of the day, what's most important is that the people have a say in how they are governed, whether they choose military leadership or democratic leadership or autocratic leadership. People must have a say in how they are governed, and they must feel comfortable to carry out whatever activities that they want to partake in. That's the most important thing at the end of the day. As they always say that there's no perfect democracy. It's a work in progress, and so everyone will decide how their countries are to be governed.
Thank you very much, Shay, for joining us on today's episodes. I mean, your insights were really, really interesting. I learned a lot, especially when you talked about interest rates, and your view on the International Criminal Court as well. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to be on the show.
You're welcome. To all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. For deeper insights into our work, visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky at SBM Intelligence. Thank you very much for listening. That's all for today.